Hey guys, still Tuesday morning. I just put up the ZR1 video, but I need to do another part to my life story. God, you want any proof that my Alzheimer's is kicking in and doing well? I completely blew a whole section of that life I was telling you about. So I spent 8 years as an elected official. How do you forget that? I mean, it's stunning. Anyway, from 1998 to 2006, I served 2 terms as a Calvert County Commissioner. And there were about, at the time, I came out of office in 2006. At that point, there were about 91 or 92,000 people in the county. So a pretty small county. Here in the DC area, it's considered pretty far out. It's about 30 miles from the White House to the northern tip of the county, and then the county itself is about 40 miles long. It's a long, thin peninsula with the Patuxent River on one side and the Chesapeake Bay on the other. It's a great county. I still love it. I moved there in '91. So in 1997, I just heard enough. I'd been there about 6 years. I was a child. I mean, I think 34 when I got elected. I was born in '64, got elected in '98. That's 34, right? So by far the youngest commissioner ever in the history of the county. I mean, by a generation, maybe 20 years. So the county was in flux at that time. The '80s were a huge growth phase. Cars and commuting had started to reach out that far, and what people considered the county was being ruined at the time. So in '97, I decided to run. Got elected in '98. Got reelected in '02. And then I actually lost my election. I tried to step into the Maryland House as a delegate in the election of 2006 and lost. And we'll come back to the minute, because really that's the crux of this message. So I spent 8 years. There are 5 commissioners. They're elected. At the time they were elected countywide. Now there's districts. And then the 5 commissioners elected their president, and that president served sort of what you might know as a county executive, but not completely. We had an appointed county administrator too. But for 6 of my 8 years, I served as president of that board. And you might ask, how the hell can you do that and run a company? And the Calvert commissioners, I think through today, meet on Tuesdays. That's your day in the courthouse. That's when you do all the county's work. It's the oldest form of government in the United States. It's a commission form of government, which means you have legislative and executive powers as the board. And when you want to do certain things, when you want to make new laws or new taxes, you sometimes have to go to the Maryland State Legislature for approval. So it's weird to have 5 people sitting there with both powers of the executive branch and the legislative branch. It's pretty hard to convert that into a charter form of government where you'd have a true county executive and a county council. Most people see that as just adding another layer of government, so it's not done too often. But it really taught me a bunch of things. It taught me how schools really work, school funding, how taxation works. It's a volunteer fire and rescue service, and what's expected of our volunteers and how hard they really work. Our entire county fire and rescue squad was volunteers. So every ambulance run, every fire run, every accident was tended to by volunteers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's pretty amazing. But how do you fund a sheriff's department? How's it work? How do you pay them? I mean, it was amazing. I was in office during 9/11, and we had to call in air support over our nuclear power plant. We're the closest one to the White House. So it was a big deal. It was just an amazing time. Let's see. What did it teach me? It taught me how to speak to people individually and in crowds. And it taught me a key lesson I carry forward to today. And that is, any decision I make and the process I use to make it must be able to stand up to the scrutiny of public investigation and public comment. So every decision that I made during that time frame, every decision I make through today, I make it as if I have to stand up in front of a gymnasium full of angry voters and be able to explain the decision process. I don't try to bend your will to mine. I don't try to get you to agree with my decisions. I do that even today. But what I do hope is that you can get an understanding of how the decision was made, the process we went through, the facts we solicited, the decision process itself. That's all I felt I was due to the citizens. Understand the decision, you don't have to agree with it. And I feel that's something that's a value that I carry forward to today, and I think it's served me well. The other thing I found out is it's how easy it is for people to, no matter who you're in front of, give something away. I see so many politicians doing that. It's far easier to say, yeah, I agree with you, I'll make that happen, than it is to sit with them and explain why that may not make sense or why that is not a responsibility of government. You know, people get a little bit frustrated or angry with you, but I'd rather have that than try to sit in a formal legislative session and come up with yet another thing we need to give away. I think we've gone too far with that in government. And it's a feel-good. I see a lot of politicians use that as a feel-good, or even worse, to be popular, to make sure that these 10, 50,000 people vote for me next time because I promised them I would give them what they were asking for. And you do that night after night, month after month, year over year, and you just can't give it away fast enough to use that as the way you say popular. I certainly had my detractors, and people probably still hate me to this day, but I held people accountable, and if we were talking about doing something new, we need to understand why we were doing it, how it benefited the population, not just a couple of the people that asked. The other thing it taught me was try to understand the difference between what I call the noisy minority and the majority. Lots of times there's, I see it in the news all the time, I see it on Facebook, I see it in social media, there's a very noisy group that you could be mistake for how the majority of people feel, because it's a very noisy minority. It's very vocal. It's a lot of email, a lot of phone calls, a lot of texts, a lot of posts. But you find out the majority of people probably don't support that position. And these people who are advocators or avocations, you know, try to make it seem like, oh, there's a whole bunch of people behind it. So when you're elected, you kind of have to figure out the difference. And when you hold a public hearing, if 500 people show up, 50 speak, and they're all angry about something, the people who support the initiative you're having a public hearing on stay at home, and you have to find some way to discern the difference. And that has served me well too. If there's a complaint amongst my my employees or a complaint amongst my clients, I try to make sure that it's not just a few people making a lot of noise, it's truly an underlying problem of the company or of my clients. And that again, that's another thing that served me well. So there's this country song out there called Some of God's Greatest Gifts Are Unanswered Prayers. It certainly doesn't feel it at the time, but in 2006 I lost my bid for delegate, and it stung. I don't lose too often, and so it was a big moment for me. We went off as a family and spent, you know, a week on vacation the day after the election. It took me a while to get over that I had lost, but from 2006, if you remember the timelines from my other videos, the timeline from 2006 to 2018, really those 12 years have been the best of my life, and it was because I wasn't worried about politics, I wasn't worried about staying elected, I wasn't worried about running for office. Serving in public office is actually a pretty fulfilling experience, but running to keep your job every 4 years or every 2 years if you're in Congress is a bit of a life killer. So that's probably the number one thing I took from this. Probably the number one thing I want to convey to you is that a loss in the moment may actually be the greatest gift you've ever received. It certainly was true in my life. In the 12 years since that loss, since the worst day of my life, it's turned out to be one of my best. So, you know, I would advise you to please contemplate, you know, thinking about that you lost this or you didn't get that because there's a greater plan in place for you. There's something in front of you. Not every loss is a bad thing. So the last thing I'll tell you is a story around that. You know, we had our kids while I was in office. I think we were the first to do that. Anne-Marie gave birth to both our kids while I was elected, one in 2001 and one in 2003. So when I came out of office, you come out of office at the end of the year. So at the very end of 2006, as we got into the holidays, that's the week you come out and you turn the board over to the next board. And so I was home. And what I didn't realize was within a few weeks of being at home, my son, Sean, who was, you know, like 4 years old, I think, 2001, about 5, maybe 5.5, actually went to Anne Marie and said, hey, when did Dad move in? That's cool. And that was kind of a shot to the chest. That was something that I didn't realize my kids didn't think I lived with them. And the reason is that I'd put him to bed on Sunday night, and then pretty much Monday through Friday I'd work all day and then go do politics. You know, we had public hearings. Every night when you're elected, somebody wants you out there at functions. So I was gone every night till 10 or 11 o'clock. And in fact, Anne Marie had a rule: don't come in and wake up the kids or I will kill you. In fact, when I started getting mail at the house to the Honorable David Hale, my wife actually held up and said, don't ever expect me to call you the Honorable. So anyway, so I got home at 11 o'clock, so then the kids would wake up on Saturday. I'd probably be at a Saturday morning function, but sometimes Saturday afternoon, and most of the day Sunday I was home. So they actually thought I lived somewhere else and came to stay with the family on Saturday and Sunday. And they did that from their birth to about 5 years old. So I guess that was the second thing, the second reason I made this video was just make sure that pursuing your dreams doesn't leave those most important to you in the caboose or along the side of the road as you continue down the path. I did that for a few years, and my son's asking my wife when I moved in, you know, was really a lesson learned for me. Guys, that's really it. I just wanted to put it up there. It was a pretty big hole in my life that I did not put in the prior video, so I just wanted you to know about it. There were real lessons learned from it. Hope you enjoyed it. We're at 12 minutes. Let's get out of here. Talk to you later, everybody. Bye.